welcome Kristen and Michelle and Melissa, if you can hear me. Christy, so glad you're here, and Whitney, so glad to see you. Danny's back in the live think tank tonight. Welcome. All right, so going to have maybe 4 of you that are new, and probably a lot watching recorded that are new tonight. So I just want to let you know that this is a very safe place. It is recorded, but it's still a very safe place to ask any question that you might have. You're going to watch me go down the teaching document for the questions that have been submitted prior to the meeting. And then at the end, if there's anything that you have, just either put it in the chat or raise your hand, and I'll make sure that I get to it. Ellen, who's an MC Gen, and our friend Kristen H., who's an EA science teacher, for submitting some wonderful questions for us to go over this week. And I think that their questions are really going to support all of you as well. So it does not matter whether you're PE, music, science, math, little people, 3-year-olds or high school students, you will get a lot from this. So again, thank you to Ellen and Kristen. We're going to start with Ellen's series of questions and my coaching on it. So she says she's starting on the generation and use of assessment, and she wants to make sure she's on the right track. So based on your KOS, Ellen, you use the BOY, which is beginning of year already data, to determine that number and operations is a weakness for your students. All right, and so these are the things that you used. A student questionnaire to get information about their feelings on certain math skills. And you learned that about a quarter said they find subtraction difficult, but none said they find addition difficult. Interesting finding, right? And then from that, you planned on giving a pre-assessment to get more a concrete picture on how they do with subtraction. Now, I first of all want to say this. How amazing. Look, you can see and hear Ellen learning and growing and understanding her students at a deeper level here, right? She might not have ever done this before, and she might have just done what, is required. Here's what the textbook says we have to do and whatever. I'm not saying you did, Ellen, but I'm just saying from my lens here, I can see the depth at which you're growing. Also, I want you to know when Ellen submitted this question into me, it was just in one full-on paragraph because that's how you guys submit it inside of the Monday form. And notice how my assessor brain has bulleted things out. Notice how I am I'm putting into bullets the things that she now knows and things she's done. I'm adding numbers to it. I'm adding colors for things that stand out to me. So pay really close attention to the way my brain is organizing things so that I can understand it when I'm not really in the classroom there with you. So the first question here is, would you suggest I include this information in the KOS evidence to further explain why I chose this topic to focus on, or in my write-up for generation and use of assessment, or do not include it at all? Okay, so I love your reflective thought pattern around that. First of all, that pre-assessment for me would 100% go in KOS, like in the group profile. That's where I would put it, for sure. But when it comes to, or in the write-up for generation and use of assessment, I'm probably going to refer back to it because there's a question in Gen and U of A that says something like, because of the analysis of what you know about your students, what ... or why ... or how ... So I think you're going to see it in your writing again in the Gen U of A, but it's going to be from an analytical lens there. It's not going to be from just a descriptive, like, here's the evidence, let me show you, this is why I did it. And that's how it's going to be over in the KOS. It's going to be, here's evidence, this is what I knew that they needed and I had to do. So let's continue. So I'm thinking I'd like to focus on subtraction of 2- and 3-digit numbers with regrouping. My plan is to teach some lessons in this standard and then give the formative assessment to gauge how they are doing. So here are my questions. Number 1, Is it too simple to include a formative assessment that just has students solve subtraction problems? Now, Ellen, I can't remember, but I'm thinking your kids are third grade. So that would be like on the low end of MC Gen as far as age band goes. But that doesn't really matter. I'm just alluding to your word simple here, too simple. What I want to offer you, and all of you actually here, is what is the purpose of formative assessment? That the National Board is considering that you understand the purpose of formative assessment. And I'm just going to lay it out there for all of you so you truly know. And then from there, we can go back and ask ourselves that same question. So the purpose of formative assessment, Tracey's opinion, and it's a pretty regarded opinion, I think. I draw this from experts, okay, in the field of assessment. Number one, it is continuous monitoring of students' understanding of the mathematical concepts or goals during your instruction, while you're teaching. Remember, you said here, my plan is to teach some lessons in this standard. So while you're teaching them, you're using formative assessment for monitoring. Okay, so it's not like a benchmark where you wait until you've done all this and you benchmark and see where they got. It's a continuous monitoring. It also allows you, the teacher, to identify areas where students are struggling or have misconceptions. Let's say inside of focusing on subtraction 2 and 3-digit numbers with regrouping, let's say you have 3 standards or goals or objectives, whatever you call them in your state targets. Which area are they struggling in and why? Is it place value? Do they not understand the place value part of it? Do they not understand quantity? Like what is it that they're struggling? So it's a continuous monitoring where you're identifying areas that they're struggling or that they're having misconceptions. When we teach kids to borrow across zeros, well, that's awful. I'm glad I don't teach that on a daily, but they have so many misconceptions around that. They have a lot of misconceptions around borrowing, period. But that's what you're looking for here in the formative. You're looking to say, hey, I see this, and I'm going to reverse course and reteach, or I'm going to change course and use a new strategy. I'm going to go back to more concrete strategies and then move to representational and then to abstract, that type of thing. The third thing that a formative really must do is, or really does, is offer you the opportunity to adjust those teaching strategies, which is what I was just talking about. You either go right when you were going left, you go back when you were going forward. And in the end, it's going to impact students' learning. That's what's going to happen. It has to do that. So your student achievement is going to change. It's going to get better in whatever those objectives are you're focusing on. So let's go back to the original question. Is it too simple to include a formative assessment that just has students solve subtraction problems? All right, so I think what our mindset here is around this assessment is the physical properties of it instead of what will I gain from this? So if we had, like, on the left side of a T-chart, here's the physical properties, and I'm thinking this is too simplistic and they're just solving subtraction problems. And then I put over on the right side of the T-chart, okay, what each one of those problems that I've got over here on the left on the on the worksheet, am I able to analyze them? Is it going to provide me monitoring that they know what these goals are? Is it going to provide me areas where I can specifically point to and say they have misconceptions or they're struggling? Is it going to allow me to say I need to adjust my teaching strategies and go back to concrete or representational versus abstract? That's the way we look at an assessment. And assessors will look at it that way too. They're not going to look at it and go, oh, that's a simple worksheet. They're going to look at the way you're thinking about what's inside of the problem. So let's go down and talk about what a summative math assessment might be for you, because your next question is, should the summative assessment be structured like a post-test to show growth from the formative? Or can the summative include additional types of questions not addressed on the formative? All right, so now let's remember this. Very important here. The formative is guiding you in your teaching, and you are showing the assessor that, look, I don't just teach, and test at the end. And if they failed, they failed. If they passed, they passed. We move on. That the National Board Assessor is looking to see that you understand that it's a cycle. The assessment runs in a cycle, and it has progress monitoring along with a true assessment that would be measured with a score. And summatives are measured with a score. So it doesn't have to match hand in glove. That doesn't mean it won't. Some people, they do a formative and then they've got problems very similar on the summative. For me, Tracey's opinion, it's not as powerful. It doesn't provide as much evidence of your depth as a teacher and your breadth in the idea of what assessment looks like and should look like to understand your students. But you could do that. Here's what a good summative math assessment for 2 to 3 digit borrowing might look like in my case. And remember, analysis value is key here. So when you look at this test that you give them, the summative, what analytical value can you get from it? What analytical value? You've got to be able to dig deep and pull things apart. Let's go back to my doctor analogy. If you go to the doctor and the doctor just takes your temperature, takes your vitals, looks at you, and that's it, and says, okay, take some Tylenol, rest for 3 days, and call me if you still have problems, he or she's not going to be able to analyze very much because there's not very much there to analyze and look at. Now, let's say the doctor says, wow, you've been having headaches for 5 months? Oh my gosh, you are not able to go how many hours without Tylenol or ibuprofen? All of these things, he or she is going to order some type of imaging, probably some type of blood test. Okay, that blood and those imagings together are going to help that doctor go deeper into trying to figure out what they know and don't know about how your body is working at that moment. We're wanting to know, how are your kids' brains working around 2 to 3 digit borrowing, subtraction with borrowing. That's what we're wanting to know here. So we got to have enough information inside of our summative so that we can pick that apart for the assessor. So a variety of problems with different difficulty levels, I believe, is, have some easy, some difficult. So you can say, hey, when they're working on the problems that have, 1 step or have place value of only in the tens place, they're fine. But when it gets more difficult, they're not. See how you can really analyze that. Problems that are both vertical and horizontal formats. So if you only give kids the horizontal formats where you've set it up for them in place value and they haven't had to set anything up themselves, it's going to be a far easier exam. It's not going to give you as much analytical value than if they had to stack the problem themselves and work it out. I think a mix of like standard subtraction problems, word problems that are going to require some translation from these equations of subtraction, some multi-step, maybe 1 multi-step problem. I feel like that in the end, this assessment, this summative for your students has to ensure that it addresses and assesses all of the goals that you had for the unit. So whereas formative is not going to address all the goals for the unit, but summative is going to address all the goals for the unit. It definitely is. So that's really what I want you to know there. And are there any examples of a KOS written commentary worksheet you could share? No, I don't really have those. I'll tell you, here's what happened. I ran a beta program of 12 teachers back in 2021. I feel like it was COVID. And I watched those teachers very closely, met with them weekly, saw what their questions were, saw what their misconceptions on the process were, really helped them to unpack things in a way that they weren't unpacking it without me as a candidate. And that's how I came up with these worksheets. Whatever their pitfalls were, I developed worksheets after the fact. You see, I didn't have the worksheets for the beta group. I did a lot of live hours with the beta group. so that I could know that I developed this program for those pitfalls. So for that reason, I did not have the worksheets. But I promise you, if you can think like I've taught you to think here about your formative and your summative, you're going to be able to, in your mind, work through those. What's probably happening with you too, Ellen, is on the KOS, you're giving more information, and you're probably like, oh my gosh, I feel like I've already written this in the form. And why am I writing it over here? I really want you to go back and look at those questions again. Clarify the question on the form versus the question in the written commentary part of this, which is on the form. The form questions are the written commentary. And then I want you to see what the difference is. And if you still cannot understand the difference, push that in as a question for next week's think tank. Because that way, or whenever we come back to think tank again, 2 weeks, the 21st. No, well, it's not the 21st. Forgive me. Remember, friends, I just came back off of surgery. The next time we meet C4, it's Tuesday, the week of the 21st, like maybe the 19th. And then I'll help clarify it even more for you. Okay? But I think you have this. I think don't be afraid that you don't have the answers, because remember, the answers are your very own. The answers are what matches your students that you teach now. And again, thank you. Without you, there's no way I could have had all of this teaching ability for everybody else. I appreciate you. Kristen H., you're in middle school science. And so we've been talking a lot. Kristen, you're growing big. I just want to say I'm proud of you. Your forces unit finished this week, and your students scored very well, and it impressed you. See, this is what the national board process does for you, Kristen. It makes you become so incredibly analytical and reflective over your practice. Even at the end of something, you're amazed. Your students could do this all the time, but where was the energy and the focus? It was on things that didn't really impact the students as much, and that's what the national board's teaching you. So for me, I am so super proud of you about that. Better than last year's students makes me happy too. They showed growth in math and vocabulary skills, which we've been talking about is a problem with this group of kids for you right now. It's a need. And then you gave them a self-reflection assessment for the next class. Now what do I do? That's a great question. Your unit's over. I filled out some of the group info sheets you made. And so what I want to do is I want to look at this image, not necessarily for you, Kristen, at this point, but I want to catch everybody up to where you've been, and then I'm going to answer that question for you. This is in module 5 of our course for C4, and I want you to see what's happened with Kristen so far. Kristen's completed her group profile, figured out what her kids needed. She organized her unit of study. She set up her goals for it. She pre-tested or got information about what they knew and didn't know. She's taught the unit through her formative and I'm assuming summative. I didn't read about summative up here, but anyway, I'm assuming the formative has been done. That we heard her tell us about the self-reflection. Her self-reflection seems like it came after the summative. I typically like you guys to push self-assessments in the middle, and you might have, Kristen. So I'm not saying that you didn't. I'm just saying from this one paragraph. So she did her formative. She taught again, adjusted her instruction. They thought about how they were doing on it. She taught again, and she finally had a summative, which went really well. Now, these are the things over here on the right that the assessor's really looking for you to do within the assessment. It's a lot of what I just went over with Ellen on the last question as well. But what Kristen's question now is, now that she has all of this done, what do I do? All right. So here's what you're going to do, Kristen. If you haven't written your group profile form and your knowledge of students section of your written commentary, that's a 2-page section, knowledge of students. Group profile form is 2 pages long, and it connects to your group profile evidence, the group profile evidence. That's first. You have to get that done first. And then after that, you're going to move to the Gen U of A, generation and use of assessment data, because your assessment is your unit is done. You now have everything you need to write up that 5-page section, which is you need to use the worksheets. It sounds like you have use some, but you need to use the worksheets I have, the templates, to break those questions down. Otherwise, you're going to probably be way too descriptive. So I want you to even go back into that part of the course if you have to. Generation and use of assessment data. I'm not sure what module. I think that's module 7, might be 6. Look for generation use of assessment data. Go back through that if you haven't, if you watched it a long time ago. Some people are like watching all the way through and not doing the work, and then they're going to do all the work at the end, and that's okay because we all learn different, but you may just want to refresh yourself a little bit. After you complete that, then you're going to write the PLN and SN section of your paper and the reflection. Okay, so if you're in any way confused about what I just said, I want you to go back into the knowledge of students section of the course, and I want you to see how we fill out the form, then, and how that form sounds descriptively, then how we fill out the worksheets around the knowledge of our students so we know them deeply, and then how we move into generation use of assessment. All right, now, and look, Kristen, I know Kristen really well. She and I are like little besties now. And Kristen is so worried that it's already November 7th. And I'm saying to all of you right now, it's okay. Kristen, you've got the hard work done. Okay, you've got the hard work done. You literally, if you wanted to, could put this down, other than your PLN and SLN right now, getting it ready, and you could write over Christmas break if you wanted to. That is part, you have what you need to write. So you are in a really good place, my friend, right now. So that is an option for you if you wanted to do that and then pick it all back up. Again, you've got the videos of the course. You just have to say, all right, today I'm working on knowledge of students. If it's in the middle of Christmas break and you're like, I'm going to watch everything on knowledge of students. I've got all my stuff. I'm going to write it, and then I'm going to move to Gen U of A. You have everything. Okay. All right. Now let's go to your next part of this is, okay, so I'm done with my unit. I feel great about it. So before the unit test, after observations and seeing test scores, I think my PLN needs to be student engagement. All right, so now we're moving to a totally different section here, friends. Some of you haven't even got this far because Kristen's pretty far along. I want to remind you of this. This is in module 2 of the course. Kristen has already done her group profile. She's already dealt with her formative assessment, her summative assessment. All this is her evidence for KOS. She's got her unit finished. Kristen's now down here. Kristen's down here in the bottom 2 parts of the triangle, the PLN. I call it SLN. National Board calls it student need. But remember, I use SLN because we also have to have needs up here. And I don't want these needs being confusing, y'all. Okay, so this is where Kristen's at right now. We're talking down here at the bottom, and we're trying to figure this part out because all of this for her is completely done, other than her writing. Okay, so I'm saying here, your need for learning and growth. This is we're at our PLN, and you're saying the PLN is student engagement. So I want to reframe this with you, Kristen. This is all about what do you need to support your students' growth. So I'm like your need for learning and growth as a teacher. So you say my students thrive on group time, station rotations, and movement to stay awake in our 90-minute classes. Okay, so then what is your need? We have to reframe it to, I needed a solid plan to make my classroom engaging for a 90-minute block where students owned their learning and the ways in which they learned. See the difference? Big difference, right? Now we're saying I saw a need in myself, a professional learning need. I needed to do better. I was boring my kids to death. Look, here's the thing. Kids today are consuming more information than ever before in the history of the world. So we say kids are bored, they have apathy. There are some that do. I'm not saying they don't, but for the most part, they are highly engaged in information, and they are highly engaged in information that's either true or false. They really don't even disaggregate it like we do. So it's not that they don't want to hear information.
They are mixed media bags. They want to see it. They want to hear it. They want to feel it. They want to talk about it. And you know this. You recognize this, and you're like, I've got to get in the game here. But I want you to come at the PLN from the lens of you. So I am the one that needs to learn strategies to keep my kids alive and having agency in my classroom for these 90-minute blocks where they feel like they can transfer this knowledge into other subjects or into life and that type of thing. And I took this, by the way, everybody, I took all of this from what Kristen sent me. And again, from the assessor mindset, I'm bulleting. I'm trying to organize things so I can try to figure out what she's working on. She said, I learned to create lessons that ask different DOK level questions after popping up photos or mini clips to try and get my students thinking on their own before they turn and talk. That's great. Okay, so you learned. These are specific things that you learned. So you're going to have to give us evidence of how you learned those. Did you participate in a book study? Did you do self-research? Did you go to a webinar? Did you go to a conference? Did you sign up for a class? Did you work with a buddy to do like collaborative coaching with each other, peer coaching? Did you work one-on-one with an instructional coach? Did you read a book? Like what have you done to learn this? Have you reframed all of your lesson design to support this? We've got to hear evidence of how you grew. And then from that, because you did all that, because you asked different level questions, because you're popping up photos and mini clips and getting these mixed media kids going, what's the impact now? It might be that you can prove attention span before and after. It might be that you can have them do a little reflective type exit ticket type thing for you about, what made their learning sticky today. What's or even do like an experiment in the class where you just do several things for them on a day. You read to them, something very boring that they don't appreciate, and then have all of these stations and things like you have, and then have them rank for you. What is their favorite? How do they learn best, and how do they learn least, and then have them write a little reflective summary about what they appreciate inside of your classroom because of that. So that could be evidence. That's how you could prove student impact. So you go on to say, my students are also not great at analyzing data, graphs, and charts. This may be easier to show evidence before and after. Should I switch? So yeah, I agree with you, Kristen. It's probably easier to show evidence, but is it something you are completely passionate about? Is it something that you have truly changed and grown yourself in? I don't think so. It kind of sounds like the safe route that is not really safe anyway at all, because you're not going to prove your learning. And that's what the PLN's about, is proving your learning. So the SLN, we had previously discussed that my students really needed to improve their math and vocabulary skills. I thought about ways to help them improve their vocabulary knowledge and math skills for the unit we just finished. I say we need more details. That's very vague. We got to get specific on that. And I have collaborated with other teachers, staff members, and parents, and I'm saying how from the assessor lens. I still like that as your SLN for them. I love that it connects to your unit, but it never has to connect to your unit. So just because I love that doesn't mean it has to. I'm going to say candidates I work with, 7 times out of 10, it never connects to the unit, and that's perfectly fine. So give us some more details of ways that you help them. So your overall thing is, what are your thoughts on my PLN and SLN? And again, I like student engagement as a PLN, and I like, and you might, I'm thinking too, with student engagement, you might want to call it student agency and engagement, or student ownership and engagement. You might want to add ownership and engagement. You're really wanting to attach some, I don't know why I want that, but that's just what I'm thinking. Anyway, let's look at PLN beside SLN, or SN, as I've said to you guys. On On the PLN, from the lens of the assessor, we are looking for proof that your professional need was met. Okay, so we talked about that you've got to have like, emails of things you went to, or you might have to have something from somebody who did a book study with you. There's loads and loads of ways to evidence. There's no right way. There's no wrong way. You don't just have to have that you signed up for a webinar. You can have self-research notes, but we need evidence that you met your professional learning need of getting kids buy-in to owning, having agency in their classroom and engagement, higher engagement levels. Evidence of your growth, efforts, and how it impacts students. So now, because you did all this, again, how does it impact students? And we can talk about that again through all of the things that I talked about earlier with reflective statements and kids measuring what things really help them transfer knowledge and da-da-da. On the SLN side, notice the difference. You must prove collaboration. On the SLN side, you must prove collaboration. So you don't have to on PLN. So in SLN, we have to prove the need. The need is that these kids have a huge need around math and vocabulary skills. You can prove that through test scores. You can prove that through surveys of teachers, last year's teachers, or teachers for that, like all the teachers in a row. Collaboration, give us specific ways you've collaborated. It might be calibrating assignments inside of PLC. It might be, reaching out to someone who's a guru inside of math vocabulary and really working to get strategies. Lots of ways that we could collaborate. It could be collaborating with parents to help them understand how to mesh, vocabulary and math as a language into the real world. And then your science, but anyway, science, right? Math skills, vocabulary knowledge, but your science teacher, because remember, you're proving science now. So, math and science go together though. And then evidence of impact on students. So because you collaborated with these people, because you recognize that these students had a deficiency in vocabulary knowledge and these math skills that are connected indelibly with your science content, what can students do now? Like, what's the, from point A to point B? Point A, it was a hot mess. We got on that hot mess express and got to point B. Now at point B, because everything you did in between, voila. Where are they at now with, what do they think about vocabulary now? How do they attack vocabulary? How do they connect vocabulary? How do they transfer information? How do they conceptualize better? Do they look at things from a larger, bigger whole and then break down into parts? Or is it now that they really can see the parts and how, because of the parts of whatever this word is or whatever's happening conceptually in this reading, they can connect it to knowledge that they've had, around the solar system because of a particular root of this word. I don't know. I'm just kind of blah, blah, blah in here about that. I just wanted you guys to see the difference though in that PLN and SLN. And for you, you're ready to move on with this as well. So when do I know I'm ready to write my papers? Should I go back and collect more information? All right. Again, nothing is more important right now for you than to make sure that you have your group profile evidence together and your KOS, those 2 pages of the written commentary done, that you've got enough evidence, you have everything you need. And so that shouldn't take you a lot of time. Then if you want to bank this one for a little while and go back and finish it during the Christmas break, that's fine. And then go ahead and move over to C3 because I know you're anxious to get to C3 in your case. Go ahead and do that. You'll have what you need. I would finish this PLN and SLN before I leave it. I'd go ahead and finish collecting the evidence, and you actually can write that section as well. It's called participation in learning communities. It's after generation and use of assessment data. You can go ahead and look at those questions and write that section too. It's only 2 pages. And that way you at least have the draft of that and you have everything you need before you move on. So there's lots of ways to do this. But for me, if I'm in your position, I'm just going to finish C4, honestly. And I'm going to make sure that I am ready to hit the ground running in January with C3 which is going to be way easier just because C3 is way easier, but also because you've grown into a national board teacher through this one. C4 makes you think so differently. It's not going to be that hard to think about how to think like a national board teacher in C3. Okay?